Hey ladies and gentlemen, sorry I couldn't be here today, but I'm going to kind of talk through some examples so that you kind of have a way to review before you go ahead and take your quiz. So let's take a look at number one. So for number one, it tells us that the measure of angle 7 is 100. So the measure of angle 7 right here is 100. Okay, then it asks us to find the measure of angle 3, which is right here. So the first thing I want to ask myself is how are 7 and 3 related? Well, here are some things I noticed. First of all, I noticed that both of those angles are on the inside of the parallel lines. So they're interior. So they're either going to be consecutive interior or they're going to be alternate interior or they're going to be supplementary. Well, I see they're both on the inside and they're on opposite sides. So that makes them alternate interior angles. Then we need to ask ourselves, okay, what makes up alternate interior angles? What does that mean? Well, if they're alternate interior angles, that means they're congruent, so that means that the measure of angle 3 also has to be 100 degrees. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at measure of angle 7. So the measure of angle 7 is 95. Then it wants to find the measure of angle 6. Well, what I noticed about the measure of angle 7 and the measure of angle 6 is that they're both on the inside. So that makes them consecutive angles. Okay, they're on the inside and they go right in a row. Remember, consecutive angles add up to 180 degrees. So let's just call angle 6 x because we don't know what it's equal to. So then I know that 95 plus x is equal to 180. So we need to subtract 95 from both sides. So then once we do that, we get 180 minus 95. That's going to give us 85. So the measure of angle 6 would then be 85. Next, let's take a look at the next one. The measure of angle 1 is 120. So now we want to find the measure of angle 5. So what I noticed is that they're both on the outside of the parallel lines. So the next question I need to ask myself, are they alternate exterior angles? So I noticed that they're on opposite sides of the transversal on the outside of the parallel lines. So that means they're alternate exterior. Now remember that alternate exterior angles are congruent. So that means that the measure of angle 5 is also 120 degrees. Next, let's take a look at number 4. So the measure of angle 4 is 20. Find the measure of angle 7. All right, well, this gets a little tricky. So to do this, we're going to have to use the idea of vertical angles. So if measure of angle 4 is 20, that means that the measure of angle 6 is 20. Now I notice that 7 and 6 are consecutive interior angles. So that means our measure of angle 7, which we don't know, plus 20 needs to be 180. So we could basically just take 180 minus 20, and that's going to give us the measure of angle 7. So the measure of angle 7 then is going to be 160. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. If the measure of angle 3 is 140, so this guy is 140, find the measure of angle 8. Okay, well, let's look at it this way. Okay, so 3 and 7 are alternate interior angles. So that makes 7 140. Then I notice that 7 and 8 are supplementary. They form a linear pair. Lines add up to 180. So 140 plus x for whatever 8 is has to add up to 180. So now to solve for x, I can subtract 140 from both sides. So then I get that x is equal to 40 degrees for the measure of angle 8. X is equal to 40 degrees. Okay. Last but not least, let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, we want to find the measure of angle 1. So the measure of angle 4 is 30. So what I notice is that 4 and 5 form a line. Okay, so let's start there. So 30 plus whatever angle 5 is has to add up to 180. So then we can subtract 30 from both sides, and we get that x is equal to 150. So this right here is 150. So then what I notice is that angle 1 and angle 5, they're both on the outside on opposite sides of the transversal. So those two are alternate exterior angles. So angle 1 also has to be 150. So for some of these, you kind of have to work using what you know to fill it out. Okay? Let's take a look at some more examples. So use the figure below to match the angle pairs with the special angle relationship. Fill in the blank with corresponding, alternate interior, alternate exterior, vertical angles, supplementary, and also consecutive. You also could have consecutive angles. So let's take a look at 3 and 8. So I noticed that 3 and 8 are both on the inside on opposite sides of the transversals. That makes them alternate interior. And I'm just going to abbreviate, but if you want to write out the full thing, you can. Please make sure that you don't just write interior, or you don't just write alternate, because there's alternate exterior and alternate interior. And interior can mean a lot of things, so you need alternate and interior. So let's take a look at our next one, angles 1 and angle 3. So what I noticed about angles 1 and angle 3 is that they're sitting across from each other. So because they're sitting across from each other, that makes them vertical. So that makes them vertical angles. And remember that vertical angles are congruent. They have the same measure. Let's take a look at angles 1 and angle 6. So what I noticed about angle 1 and angle 6 is they're both on the outside of the two parallel lines. Not only that, but they're sitting on opposite sides of the transversal. So that makes them alternate exterior angles. Next, let's take a look at 7 and 8. So we have 7 and 8. So I noticed 7 and 8 form a line together. That makes them supplementary. Supplementary means that they form a line. Okay, and it also means they're a linear pair. Supplementary and linear pair mean the same thing. Last but not least, let's take a look at 3 and 7. So 3 and 7. I notice they're both on the inside, and I notice that they're boom, boom, right in a row. 3, 7. So that makes them consecutive. So they're consecutive angles. All right, let's take a look at number 12 through 18. So it tells us that the measure of angle 1 is 98. So this guy right here is 98. And the measure of angle 2 is 40. So we have two parallel lines, this one and this one. But then we also have two transversals. Okay, this one and this one. So those two lines are not parallel. So we want to focus on just our parallel lines. So let's say it wants us to find the measure of angle 3 to start off with. Well, I noticed that 98 and 3 form a line. So 98 plus 3 is going to give me, not 98 plus 3, 98 plus whatever the measure of angle 3 is. Let's just call the measure of angle 3 x, has to be equal to 180. So then we're going to subtract 98 from both sides, and we get that x is equal to 82. So the measure of angle 3 has to be 82. All right, let's take a look at number 14. So number 14 asks us to find the measure of angle 5. Well, first let's find angle 5. Angle 5 is here. So I notice that angle 5 is in the bottom right corner of the parallel line. I notice that 3 is also in the bottom right corner of the parallel line. That makes them corresponding angles. Remember that corresponding angles are equal. So because it's a corresponding angle to 3, I'm just going to write that down. Okay, then their measure is equal. So this guy is also 82. Now let's take a look at the measure of angle 7. So the measure of angle 7 is right here. So I notice that 7 is a vertical angle from angle 2. So because they're vertical angles, that means they're congruent. So this one is also 40. Next, let's take a look at the measure of angle 9. So I don't know the measure of angle 9. Okay, what I do know is that angle 9 corresponds with this angle right here. So they would have the same measure. I don't know that angle, but I do know that the measure of angle 7 is 40. And that angle and this angle have to add up to 180. So 40 plus whatever that angle is has to be equal to 180. So I'm going to subtract 40 from both sides, and I get that x is equal to 140. So the measure of this angle right here is 140 because it corresponds with this angle. Next, they want us to find the measure of angle 4. So I'm just going to clean this up a little bit for us here so that we can see it. So now we want to find the measure of angle 4, which is right here. So what I notice is that measure 1 measure of angle 1 is going to be congruent to measure of angle 4. Well, why is that? They're both sitting on the upper right side of the parallel line. That makes them corresponding angles. So if angle 1 is 98, measure of angle 4 is also 98. Let's take a look at the measure of angle 6. So what do we know about the measure of angle 6? Well, I know that it forms a line with the measure of angle 7. So the measure of angle 7, if we go look, is 40. So 40 plus the measure of of the angle 6 needs to add up to 180. So again, subtract 40 from both sides, and we get that x is equal to 140. So the measure of this angle is 140. So here we want to take a look at the measure of angle 8. So I'm noticing that angle 8 and angle 7 are both on the bottom right corner of the parallel lines. That makes them corresponding angles. So angle 7 is equal to angle 8. So that means that they have the same measure. So if measure of angle 7 is 40, the measure of angle 8 is 40. So that concludes your review for today. So go ahead and get the quiz from the substitute, and please make sure you stay quiet until everybody has finished their quiz. There are calculators up front if you need them. Thanks for listening.